This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damian, David, and Matt.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview here on the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Matt. I'm here today with David, and we're down to two teams left, and the second to last team here is the New York Yankees. So the Yankees last year were the American League champions. They went to the World Series and lost in 5 games to the Dodgers. And they obviously had a fantastic roster last year. But it's going to be different this year. They have, they've lost Juan Soto. We'll talk about that in a minute. Garrett Cole's going to miss the season with Tommy John surgery. That's a big one that we're going to talk about. They did make some additions. Very busy offseason for this team. But, a team that has obviously the Yankees, and their expectation every year is World Series, right? I mean, that's been the case for the last 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think there's a lot of angst right now with New York Yankees fans. The fact that they haven't won a World Series since 2009, which was 16 years ago, and this has got to be one of the I don't know the number, but this has got to be one of the longest droughts in Yankees history of not winning a World Series. And of course, last year they made it there. But David, what do you think the state of the Yankees right now is?
They're in an interesting spot, right? I mean, they traded away so much pitching depth for the 1 year of Juan Soto, and you're seeing, I think, a little bit of repercussions of that, but I don't think you'd give it away, right? You wouldn't go back and redo that. Going for Juan Soto and then trying to re-sign him was a fantastic move by the Yankees. Bottom line, now they have to flex their financial muscle, right? They have to be, the New York Yankees. I feel like they did do that to some respects here. They were able to take on Cody Bellinger's contract. They signed Max Fried. Overall, as we get into this, it was a successful offseason in a vacuum. Problem is, you have the context of losing Juan Soto, right? Getting outbid by your neighbor in New York, the Mets. That doesn't feel good. And you couple that with a lot of the guys are experiencing those injury issues. This could be a really bit of a nervous season to start, because this Yankees team is very much going to still run through the same guy it's run through for the last 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Yankees, as you mentioned, that's flexing that financial muscle. They still have a $275 million payroll, which is top 5 in the league. So we'll see what happens with their their situation. I think I'm preface everything we're about to say by saying that I am not a Cashman guy, and I think he might be in trouble if this season doesn't go well after what happened this past offseason. But I guess we can go ahead and start talking about what he did do this offseason. As you mentioned, they added Max Fried to play to be a what would have been their number 2, but now he's going to be their ace, I guess, because I know he's not getting the opening day start, but Garrett Cole's out, so Max Fried gonna be there for the Yankees. Paul Goldschmidt, they added him coming off a down year. He did turn it around a little bit in second half of the season, but it was definitely a down year. He is 38 years old, so he showed signs of aging. He's an old first baseman who may or may not rebound this year. So interesting signing. It's a 1-year deal, so obviously there's not a lot of downside to it. But that's been a black hole for the Yankees for the better part of the last ever since Mark Teixeira retired. Really, I mean, first base has been a problem for them. I mean, Anthony Rizzo had a good half season there, but I mean, they really haven't been able to find a long term answer there. And Goldschmidt's obviously not a long term answer, but maybe he could be an answer for for one season here. Brian Yarborough, they actually added him yesterday because their pitching rotation is dismantled by injuries right now, and they really needed a big league arm. And Brian Yarborough can be a swing guy. So that was really all their free agent moves they made, and which you would expect the Yankees to be big in free agency, but they made a lot of trades this time. They brought in Fernando Cruz and Alex Jackson in a trade from the Reds. Fernando Cruz, a really high upside reliever. He's got really good projections this year. Alex Jackson, a catcher he'll be the backup catcher. He's fine defensively. He can hit for some power, but the bat's just not great. Cody Bellinger they brought in via trade. That was a very interesting trade. It was almost like a free agent ad because they basically brought the contract in, and that's how they made the trade, just taking in all the money. They really didn't give up anything for that. So, um,
You
you
didn't
know,
put
Cody.
Cody. You didn't put Cody Poteet on the subtractions, which it tells you about
Well,
what that value is.
yeah, exactly.
That's
So,
perfect. That
yeah.
says the whole story.
But yeah, Cody Bellinger coming in and play center field. Obviously, that was their way of replacing Juan Soto. And when you're replacing Juan Soto with 2025 Cody Bellinger, you don't feel great about that. But although Cody Bellinger is yeah, he's still a good player, but he's not Juan Soto. Devin Williams, they brought in via trade. That's a big one. They lost Clay Holmes to free agency. So, Clay Holmes closed for them the last couple of years. Of course, late last season, he lost the closure role. It went to Luke Weaver, who is still with this team. But Devin Williams is obviously a much more reliable option at the back end of that bullpen than
Mhm.
Luke Weaver. Although, the longevity of Devin Williams is something that's going to be interesting because he's got a really unusual pitch that he throws, and he's dealt
Well,
with back injuries already.
he's only
So
got 1 year. They didn't extend him or anything. He's
right,
got 1 year.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. But we'll see if he's able to repeat, his previous couple of years here this year.
Mhm.
But and then I went ahead and put on here Carlos Carrasco because he is going to be in the big league rotation opening day, which is kind of an indictment of Cashman. The fact that they have a $300 million payroll and Carlos Carrasco is going to be on their opening day starting rotation. So but yeah, David, I guess do you think that that Max Fried or Cody Bellinger or Devin Williams, out of the three, which one do you think is the most impactful ad that they made? And do you see any of these other guys kind of being a real contributor for them this year?
Most impactful, it's gonna be Freed, especially with Cole down. It has to be Freed. Though I do think Cody Bellinger playing in Yankee Stadium for 81 games as opposed to Wrigley Field is going to be a benefit. Wrigley Field was the second worst park for hitters last year, or is the worst park for hitters last year. I think it was the worst park. So going to Yankee Stadium, which is definitely a plus park, especially for left-handed hitters, is really going to help Cody Bellinger out. He's going to get a few extra home runs on balls that were flyouts last season in Wrigley Field with the wind blowing in a lot. So I think the impact is going to be substantial for Cody Bellinger, but I hope Max Fried is better. They spent $218 million on the guy. I feel like he needs to be, really good pitcher here in these first couple of seasons. Love the Devin Williams trade, but the guy I'm looking at is Fernando Cruz. I think the Yankees fans are going to be excited about that guy. I feel like getting him out of Cincinnati, putting him in a team that can develop relievers really well, they can get the most out of their relievers. They've obviously remade Clay, Luke Weaver, got a lot out of Tommy Kahnle the last couple of years. Like this was a strong relief group, and they're always able to kind of pull some good relief pitcher performances out. I think Fernando Cruz can join in and be a really solid eighth inning guy to kind of set up Devin Williams and work with Luke Weaver there at the back end. I think he's the dark horse in the group. And hey, good for Carlos Carrasco. You're dumping on Carlos Carrasco a little bit. He used to be a darn good pitcher, and I feel like
Oh yeah,
some injuries and some other. I think he had cancer.
yeah.
A lot of stuff. It's really good for him to get another shot. Hopefully, it goes well enough. I don't feel like I'm trusting him to throw 80 innings this year or something. But if he can just hold down the fort until Clark Schmidt and Luis Seal come back, I'm happy for Carlos Carrasco.
Yeah, and when I I'm dumping on the Yankees. I like Carlos Carrasco a lot. Like
Mhm.
I think he's a great guy. He's had a great career, but he's 38 years old, and
Yeah.
he's not an impactful pitcher in 2025. So, but not to hate on him, but moving over, we can talk about the subtractions here. Obviously, we talked about Juan Soto. Just you can't have a bigger subtraction than that unless you lose Aaron Judge somehow. So Juan Soto is there. Alex Verdugo, he was kind of disappointing last year.
Mhm.
Didn't have a great year. They were kind of hoping he would be at least a decent everyday regular in the outfield for them, but coming over from the Red Sox, but he just didn't really do much. He's now in AAA for the Braves. So that's interesting. Gleyber Torres moved on to the Tigers. That's a long-term Yankee. He's been there since 2017 in the big leagues since like
Right.
2017. So, that's a big loss. He's been a real consistently solid player for his time there. Not really a superstar, but he's been good.
Mhm.
Clay Holmes, that's a pretty big loss for me because he was really one of your most reliable relievers. I know he didn't have a great end to last season, but he was still a reliable reliever, and losing him is a big deal. He signed a big contract. If that, kind of gives you an indication on what teams valued him as. They lost Tommy Kahnle. He's been effective for the Yankees, but I don't know that he's that big of a loss. John Birdie, who apparently is Barry Bonds in the Japan series. John Birdie, they non-tendered, which was kind of interesting because he is a useful player. I mean, even if he's not hitting like Barry Bonds like he did in the Japan series, he's fast. He can play different positions, and he's a good bench player to have. But they declined Anthony Rizzo's option. Obviously, they replaced him with Paul Goldschmidt. Anthony Rizzo's dealt with some injuries again and just hasn't been the same guy over the last several years as he was earlier in his career with the Cubs. Jose Trevino they traded in that Alex Jackson Fernando Cruz trade, and they traded Nestor Cortez in that Devin Williams trade. So that's a big loss. That's a guy who was a real consistent piece of their rotation
Mhm.
for a long time that they have now moved on. So, David, any thoughts on these subtractions? I guess other than Juan Soto, who I think we've
Mm.
probably talked about Juan Soto enough at
Yeah.
this point.
I can't wait to not talk about Juan Soto anymore. I think I feel like some of the bigger losses in this are, like Gleyber Torres and John Birdie both could be playing third base for the Yankees right now, and they're kind of without a third baseman.
Yeah,
They weren't able to lock down like a Nolan Arenado trade or anything, so third base is just kind of open right now, and they got Oswaldo Cabrera in there, but like, I
yeah,
can't believe Anthony Rizzo isn't playing baseball this year. It feels wrong, and it shouldn't be the way Rizzo's career ends. I hate that. I do hope he latches on and gets back going. I mean, Carlos Carrasco is a good example of guy who's dealt with injuries but came back. I feel like Rizzo can get back to it. Just I maybe his contract demands were a little too high or something. We'll see what happens there. I think Nestor Cortez actually could be a big loss here though,
yeah.
because we're going to go to this rotation, and we talked about the Carrasco thing. Nestor Cortez would really fit nicely into this rotation right now, and they don't have him anymore.
Yeah, this rotation right now looks terrible. But we can move on and talk about the hitters here first. The bats in the Yankees lineup, they got Jason Dominguez in left field. That's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Mhm.
Showed some promise in the big leagues before before having Tommy John surgery, I believe.
Yeah.
And he came back last year, I think, and hit a little bit late in the season. But he's going to be playing left field. Cody Bellinger slotted in there at center field. Obviously, that was one of their big acquisitions of the offseason. You can't go wrong with Aaron Judge. That projection is just absolutely ridiculous. 7.4 WAR projection. He's projected to
Yeah.
have a 177 WRC plus and a 1,000 OPS this year by the
Yeah.
Fangraphs depth charts. So, I mean, that is just the guy is just absolutely on a different planet than everyone else right now, and that's well under what he did last year too, which is
Mhm.
crazy. Um, Oswaldo Cabrera there at third. As you mentioned, they don't really have a great third base option. Gleyber
Mhm.
Torres would have been a good one.
Yep.
You know, John Birdie even would have
John
been better
Birdie.
than probably been at least as good of an option as Cabrera.
Mhm.
So interesting. I know the Yankees do like him. He's been there a while now, but I don't think he's that much. Anthony Volpe at shortstop. He's interesting. He's still really young. Last year he's got off to a really good start, and then he kind of struggled in the middle of the season, and then I think he had a pretty good last month or so. But he ended up with an 86 WRC plus last year. But the defense was outstanding last year for Anthony Volpe. The base running was outstanding for Anthony Volpe. He stole 28 bases,
Mhm.
despite a 293 on base percentage, and he didn't get caught very much. And the metrics really liked his base running. So definitely, a good season for him last year. You would like to see a little bit more out of the bat. I think there is more there out of the bat. Um, it's kind of been a pattern for him in his career has been kind of takes a couple years at each level and then he takes off. I know that there's a lot of talent there. So
Mhm.
that 4 WAR projection might be a little bit high. But I think he's definitely got an opportunity to take a step forward this year. Jazz Chisholm, there at second base. Brought him in at the deadline, bringing him back this year. If he can stay healthy, I think there's a lot of talent there. Super
Mhm.
athletic, got a lot of power. I know that he's struggled a little bit with swing and miss at times. Lefties have given him problems at times. We'll see what he's able to do. With the Yankees, he was very good there in the half season after the trade. Paul Goldschmidt there at first. We talked about him a little bit. Ben Rice is going to be the DH. As you can see down at the bottom right there, injuries. Giancarlo Stanton is injured. He has
Yep.
like pretty major injuries, I believe, this time.
Yeah.
He's dealt a lot with those soft tissue injuries like hamstring pull, quad pull, stuff like that in his career. But this one sounds a little bit more serious than that, and I'm not sure what the time frame on him is going to be. I don't think it's been released what the time frame on him is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And DJ LeMahieu is also injured. He could factor in at third or at
Mm-hmm.
DH or something too. And then Austin Wells behind the plate. I saw this note earlier today. He's supposed to hit leadoff for the Yankees, and it will be the first time the Yankees have ever hit a catcher leadoff in a regular season game,
Yeah,
which
that's cool.
is pretty crazy. But and Austin Wells, he had a great year last year. Definitely shown some promise. So we'll see if he's able to, to lock that down. But David, this team feels like one they got two fairly obvious holes, but it feels like there's a lot of downside to some of these players. Like
Yeah.
it feels like Volpe might not hit. And I think that the projections are counting on him hitting better than he has.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like Goldschmidt that he could end up going off a cliff after
Mm-hmm.
last year he showed signs of it. You kind of never know with Bellinger. He's had good years and bad years. I think he's going to be good for them, but you never know with him. And then you've got Cabrera at thirds, probably going to be a hole, and then the DH spot's going to be a hole. So is this enough of an offense to contend as they did last year, especially considering what we'll talk about in a few minutes in the pitching staff being a problem?
Yeah, I think I would say your concerns are a little overblown because for one, like a lot of young guys, you're going to get a breakout. It's been too long since we've had kind of a true Yankee breakout, and they have enough star power here to see somebody overwhelm their projections. Dominguez is the obvious choice, I think, in terms of an offensive breakout. If he can just stay healthy and hit well, he'll be the guy, I think, where he can kind of finally get to that stardom potential that we've seen for a few years. I do like Volpe. I think he can be a nice like 8-9 hitter, but you have to make sure that you're not over producing your expectations. Last year he let off a ton, and I think getting him out of that leadoff spot and way down in this order is going to help him out a bunch. But even like Jazz Chisholm's still young. You could still get a big breakout season for him. Cody Bellinger's not 30 yet. I still think Cody Bellinger's a young guy who could still, have a really good year. And you like you mentioned, I think Cody Bellinger's going to have a crazy good year for the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. Just that seems obvious. The sneaky one is Ben Rice, and Ben Rice has like really good. He hits the ball really hard. He walks a lot. Like if that's a guy, if you're looking for just a kind of a surprise breakout, I feel like Ben Rice could do it. I think there is a lot of upside. You mentioned the downside; it's there, but I do think this lineup can hold together. The one I am worried about is Paul Goldschmidt, though. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. He feels like a guy. He struggled in spring. That may be just a veteran trying to get his mechanics together. I think we have to take that into account. But if Paul Goldschmidt has a rough April, the Yankees probably need to move on from him very quickly because that could be the kind, like the Jose Abreu to the Astros thing where it's dragging down the whole offense because one
Yeah.
guy you're expecting to be a producer is struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Ben Rice. He's got a .5 projection for his WAR, but he is projected to be about a 115 to 120 WRC
Mhm.
plus guy, which as a DH is just
That's
that's
fine.
average to below average as a DH. That's like okay, it's okay. But if you put him at first base, that does
Mhm.
increase his value a little bit, and he can play first base. So if, as you mentioned, if Goldschmidt really struggles, then you might be able to put Ben Rice there, and then maybe Stanton or LeMahieu get healthy and can
Mhm.
DH. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. But yeah, I'm with you on Goldschmidt, and looking at their bench, it's not great. It's okay. Oswaldo Peraza is kind of interesting because he was a former top prospect that had a lot of hype at one time, but he never really took off. He's going to be there on the bench. Escara's backup catcher, either him or Alex Jackson. Pablo Reyes is a non-roster invite that's projected on their bench here. I don't know if he's going to make the roster or not. And then Trent Grisham, really good defensive outfielder, walks a lot, doesn't make great contact. So
Yeah.
he could factor in like if Dominguez struggles or or maybe Bellinger moves to first and Grisham plays center or something on some days if Goldschmidt struggles. So um, he could be factored in. And then the prospect to know here, Spencer Jones is really their only position player prospect that has a lot of hype at the upper levels right now. And he's kind of fallen off as a prospect just a little bit. There's a pretty good bit of concern about his hit tool. He struck out 37% of the time at Double A last year in 122 games. So there's a lot to work on there. There's a lot of talent there too, but he's got a lot to work on.
Yeah.
So uh, probably not going to factor in the big leagues this year, but he's somebody they've held on to not make trades in the past. So it's pretty frustrating, I'm sure, as a Yankees fan
Yeah.
to not, for him to really struggle like he has with the strikeouts and maybe not really be the same prospect that they thought he was going to be. But guess we can move on and talk about the pitchers here. And this is where, as we mentioned before, the injury bug has really hit these guys.
Mhm.
Carlos Rodon is going to be their opening day starter. Max Fried, mentioned him, brought in through free agency. He's going to be in there. Marcus Stroman is still here. I don't know that they were even expecting Marcus Stroman to be in this rotation before spring training, and then the injury bugs hit, and then Marcus Stroman's now their number 3, which is
Yep.
scary because he's not good anymore. I mean, he's pretty cooked.
Mhm.
Will Warren is a pretty good prospect. He's at
Yep.
least interesting to watch out for here. Maybe he has a breakout. The Yankees have done a pretty good job of, like Louis Gill last year, and nobody expected him to come out and have the season he had. So maybe Will Warren could be the Louis Gill of 2025. And then, as we mentioned, Carlos Carrasco is going to be here in the rotation here at the beginning of the season. So, David, I mean, it's hard to think that this rotation is not going to be a problem for this team, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think higher of Marcus Stroman than you, especially at this point. Like he still threw 150 innings last year. Think that he'll still be a fine pitcher, but you don't want him right now as your number 3 pitcher, I think. Right? He would probably start in the playoffs unless something good happened with Will Warren if the playoffs started tomorrow. And obviously they are not, but you're gonna have to get there. You need those innings. Stroman's very valuable for that, but he's very valuable for those lower quality, 4 or 5 inning starts. You don't want those in your playoff rotation. But they still have the big 2 here with Rodon and Fried. I do think both of those guys are going to be pretty good. I still believe in Rodon. Think the stuff has always been nasty. Warren's like you mentioned. Warren's interesting. Once Clark Schmidt and Luis Heel get back, and you're able to sort out, how this rotation looks, the Yankees are going to be, aggressive on the trade front. Obviously, I don't know that they really have anything to trade at this point. Like it seems like
No.
they've burnt out all that resource. So you go from there to, maybe they have to trade for a middling player to assist this rotation. And maybe Carlos Carrasco just, he hits the fountain of youth and actually has a good season. That'd be my favorite option here
Yeah.
for them to succeed. But, this is a tough spot. And it's I mean, Garrett Cole blowing out his elbow is just something you can't plan for going into an off season. Garrett Cole's your highest paid starting pitcher. You expect him. He pitched very reliably over the last many years and never had a problem like this. And it stinks, but that's the reality now. And that $218 million they gave Freed's going to need to come through because I mean he's going to need to be the guy, I think, and he could probably drag this team along. This bullpen's pretty good.
Yeah. The thing that scares me more about this rotation, just last point here, Rodon and Fried have had injury issues too, and both of them have missed a lot of time over the last few years. And if you lose another guy in the rotation, then I mean they have nobody else. Now it does sound like Gill will probably come back somewhat early in the season. Like I think like late May is what
He's
they were looking
he
at for
went on
him.
the 60-day IL.
Yeah, like maybe early June.
So
Like he's not going to miss the whole season.
no,
But obviously Cole is, and then Schmidt is shoulder
it's
soreness, and you just never know with shoulder soreness. He might end up being out for the year. He might come back in 3 weeks. You just never
right.
know. I mean, so we'll see what happens there. But you do mention the bullpen. The bullpen's pretty good. Devin Williams obviously brought in to be the closer. Throws the screwball changeup, which is
Mhm.
really fun. And he's had an excellent career to this point.
Mhm.
Luke Weaver really had a good, last couple months there when he transitioned into a closer role. It was closing for them in the playoffs. So I don't know that I fully believe in Luke Weaver, but I think he's better than I think he's a fine reliever here, and
Yeah.
good to be a setup guy or middle reliever type. Fernando Cruz, we mentioned him earlier. I think we both really like that addition. Good
Yep.
guy that's going to get a lot of swing and miss. If he can keep the walks down, that's going to be a good one. Tim Hill, the lefty submariner, going to
Mhm.
be, he's always kind of interesting to watch. Mark Leiter Jr. You know a lot about Mark Leiter Jr., the former Cub. I've always liked him. He really gets a lot of swing and miss.
Mhm.
So that's something that the Yankees need here. And then the rest of their bullpens, it's not great. Not a lot of swing and miss there. Ryan Yarborough, it's a swing guy. Is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I guess if Carrasco struggles or have another injury or something, he would definitely slide into the rotation. He's on a big league contract, so definitely look out for him there. Um, but yeah, I mean the bullpen, I like I like the bullpen generally, especially the back end of it. I think it's a pretty solid group. Prospects to know. If you want to touch on those guys, I know they're
Chase Hampton was the one.
yeah,
I was literally trying to find another name worth writing down.
yeah.
It's Cam Schlitter is their number 5
Yeah,
prospect
I didn't
according
want
to
to say the name
Fangraphs.
because I was going to mispronounce it.
Um, I mean, he might at least be decent. The Yankees drafted a bunch of starters last offseason. I think there will be some big gains in their pitching development where you'll see some breakouts in the minors, but those guys aren't going to be ready for the bigs.
Yeah,
And this bullpen's going to need some reinforcements. I do want to toss in. They have a bunch of guys on the injured list: Jonathan Loizaga, Scott Efros,
yep.
Ian
Those
Hamilton.
Jonathan Loizaga is a big one because he's really
Mhm.
good. Like when
Wait,
he
yeah,
pitches, so
he blew out his elbow at the beginning of last year, got an internal
yep. So he
brace.
should be back this year.
Should be back this year, and that'll reinforce. I think this
Yep,
bullpen will actually be pretty good. We just got to iron out that starting rotation.
yep,
It feels like the problem here.
yep. And you mentioned Chase Hampton. He had Tommy John surgery this spring too.
Yeah,
There's another one. Like it's just
hits keep on coming.
it's hit the Yankees pretty hard this year.
Mhm.
But I guess we can talk real quick about the outlook. The Yankees have an over/under win total of 89.5. So David, over or under there?
I think I'm gonna go under, and I think I picked them to miss the playoffs in our prediction show. I might have had them as wild card 3. But that still, I think, equates to a lower win total than 89. And with a starting rotation like this, I have been very consistent in our predictions and our over unders on picking the teams that whose pitching that I really like as over, for the playoffs to succeed in the playoffs. This is a team whose pitching I do not like, and I find that to be much more important than even having an Aaron Judge on the roster. So I'm going to go under. It's probably around this, right? 87, 88, 89 as we saw last year with the Diamondbacks. That's not a guarantee that you make the playoffs, and
Yep.
that's not where the Yankees want to be.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go over on it, but like right at 90.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's fair.
you know, they were really good last year. It just they've lost enough to where they're gonna take a step back. But I Judge is so good, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to believe how good Judge has become, like on a year to year basis. Um, I don't. As long as he's healthy, they're going to win a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down on some of the other teams in their division compared to the consensus around baseball. I'm not a believer in the Blue Jays. I'm not a believer in the Rays, and I'm a little bit skittish about the Orioles with their pitching as well. So I could definitely see a scenario where this division ends up a little bit weaker. I picked the Yankees to be second in this division behind the
Mm-hmm.
Red Sox, and I picked them to make the playoffs as a wild card team. But
Mm-hmm.
their odds to make the playoffs, they're a favorite for that, minus 250. Their odds to win the AL East, plus 135. I believe they're the favorite to win the AL East. And the odds to win the World Series, plus 850. So, David, any final thoughts?
I don't think they're going to win the World Series. I wouldn't bet on
Or,
this one.
yeah,
this
I'm,
is
I'm
this
with
is
you.
this is a tough spot. This is an injury riddled team. We're hoping they are able to put it together. But yeah, that's about it for me.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.